The metal cuffs cut into his wrists, arms wrenched painfully behind his back, face smashed against the sidewalk, knees grinding into his spine. Onlookers watched, silent and afraid, all for knocking on the wrong door while black. The officers laughed, dragging him away, unaware that the man they brutalized was about to expose a secret hidden deep inside their department, one that would burn everything they thought untouchable. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. Derek Hayes had only been in Fairview, Texas, for 6 days. 6 days of unpacking boxes, setting up furniture, trying to build a new life. He hadn't even memorized his new address yet, which is why, on that hot Wednesday afternoon, he accidentally knocked on the wrong door. 3 doors down, identical white siding, identical porch light. He barely got 2 knocks in before the heavy wooden door flew open. An older white man glared at him. "What do you want?" The man barked, voice sharp. "Sorry, sir," Derek said quickly, hands raised slightly, showing no threat. "I'm looking for 428 Maple Street. I think I got the wrong house." Before the man could respond, a woman's voice called out from inside. "Call the police." Derek took a step back immediately, palms up, heart pounding. "I'm leaving," he said loudly, backing down the porch steps. "I'm leaving." He turned and started walking away, fast, but not running. Didn't matter. He heard the sirens less than 2 minutes later. When the patrol car screeched around the corner, Derek froze, arms still raised. He knew better than to run. The cruiser doors burst open. 2 officers, one thin and wiry, the other heavy-set, charged toward him. "Get on the ground," the wiry one screamed, gun already drawn. "I didn't do anything," Derek shouted. The heavy-set officer tackled him without warning, driving him face-first into the pavement. Pain shot through Derek's face and knees as the cuffs clicked too tight around his wrists. He heard laughter. "He fits the call," one officer snickered. "You people always do," the other muttered. Derek squeezed his eyes shut, breathing through the pain, feeling the hot sun burning into his skin. The world blurred around him, faces at windows, curtains twitching, silent witnesses to the humiliation unfolding. No one intervened. No one ever did. As they dragged him to the cruiser, Derek caught a glimpse of his own reflection in a car mirror. Blood trickling from a gash over his eyebrow, his shirt ripped, dirt smeared across his face. All because he had knocked on the wrong door. But this time, they hadn't just arrested some random man who would disappear into the system. They didn't know who Derek was, didn't know what he had already survived, didn't know what he was capable of, and they had just made the worst mistake of their careers. Because Derek Hayes wasn't going to disappear quietly. He was about to drag their whole rotten empire into the light and tear it down piece by piece. The holding cell smelled like bleach and sweat. Derek sat on the cold metal bench, wrists throbbing, blood drying sticky on his temple. No phone call, no questions, no rights read. They booked him like a criminal, prince, mugshot, rough hands shoving him through the process like he was invisible. He watched every move, every name tag, every security camera, every hallway layout. They thought he was just another nobody they could sweep under the rug. They were wrong. Hours dragged by. Finally, a young officer appeared at the bars, avoiding eye contact. "You're being released," he muttered, fumbling with the keys. No apology. No explanation. Just quiet shame. Derek didn't move. "On what charges?" he asked coldly. The officer hesitated. No charges filed." Derek rose slowly, stiff and aching, but with his mind sharper than ever. He let them uncuff him, let them shove a crumpled property receipt into his hand, let them lead him out the side door like garbage they didn't want seen. The bright parking lot lights stabbed at his eyes, but he didn't blink, because now the real work began. He pulled out his phone the moment he stepped onto the sidewalk. The screen was cracked from the arrest, but still worked. He made one call, a direct line to someone he hadn't needed to contact in years. A woman answered after 2 rings. "This is Veronica Lake, Civil Rights Division." "It's Derek," he said. Silence on the line. Then, tension. "What happened?" she asked sharply. "Fairview PD," he said. "Wrongful arrest. Excessive force. Racial profiling." Veronica didn't ask for details. "I'll be there by morning," she said. They ended the call without goodbyes. Derek tucked the phone back into his jacket and started walking. The police thought it was over. But they had no idea that Derek Hayes wasn't just another black man they could brutalize and forget. He had once been one of them. Before law school. Before Washington. before he had dedicated his life to ripping corruption out of law enforcement like weeds from poison ground. And now, thanks to their arrogance, he had a personal reason to finish what he started. At home, Derek sat at his battered kitchen table, spreading out a notepad, a battered laptop, and a handful of receipts and timestamps. He built the timeline meticulously. 3:24 p.m., knocked on wrong door. 3:26 p.m., owner called 911, reported suspicious blackmail. 3:28 p.m., police arrival, no questions asked. 3:29 p.m., physical assault, no attempt at dialogue. 3:31 p.m., unlawful arrest, no Miranda rights. He cross-referenced public records, noting which officers responded, matching badge numbers, vehicle numbers, shift schedules. And when Veronica arrived at sunrise, eyes bloodshot but determined, he slid the file across the table without a word. She read for 2 minutes, then set it down. "This isn't just an excessive force case," she said. "This is systemic." Derek met her gaze steadily. "I know." Veronica leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You're not going to settle, are you?" "No," Derek said, voice cold and sure. "I'm going to tear them apart. And this time, there would be no safe exits. No quiet retirements. No settlements without scars." They had built their careers on the backs of broken lives. Now, it was their turn. The complaint was filed by noon. Hayes versus City of Fairview, et al. Civil rights violations. Excessive force. False arrest. Malicious prosecution. It wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a declaration of war. Veronica worked the media channels carefully. No drama. No shouting. Just the facts. No probable cause. No body cam footage preserved. No charges filed after violent arrest. Victim, a black attorney and former federal civil rights investigator. By nightfall, the story had spread across Texas news outlets. By the next morning, it hit national syndication. The mayor of Fairview called for an immediate review. The police chief released a statement full of hollow promises and regrets. Derek knew better. They weren't sorry. They were scared. Inside the Fairview Police Department, panic set in. Phones rang off the hook. Anonymous officers leaked documents to journalists hungry for blood. And then came the first real crack. A young patrolman, Officer Nunez, requested a private meeting with Veronica and Derek. They met in a dingy coffee shop off the highway. Nunez looked exhausted, sweat soaking through his uniform even in the air conditioning. "I didn't sign up for this," he muttered, voice shaking. "What they did to you. It happens all the time. They just thought you were nobody." Derek leaned forward slowly. "How bad is it?" he asked. Nunez swallowed hard. "Bad," he said. "They have code words for it. Clearing the streets. Cleaning house. They profile, stop, and rough up people they think won't fight back." Veronica took out a recorder and set it on the table without a word. Nunez didn't stop talking. Secret groups of officers bragging about the numbers they racked up. Quotas unofficially encouraged by supervisors. Body cam batteries accidentally dying when things got rough. It was systemic. It was deliberate. It was standard operating procedure. Derek felt a cold fury settle deep in his gut. They hadn't just attacked him. They had made a career out of attacking people like him. And they thought no one would ever fight back hard enough to matter. Not this time. By the end of the meeting, Nunez agreed to testify if granted protection. Derek and Veronica promised it. They left the coffee shop knowing exactly what came next. Discovery demands. Subpoenas for internal communications. Requests for personnel files, complaint records, disciplinary histories. And if Fairview PD thought they could bury the evidence, Derek would make sure they buried themselves instead. At home that night, Derek spread a fresh sheet of paper across the table and began sketching out the case structure. Phase 1. Exposure. Phase 2. Discovery leaks. Phase 3. Public hearings. Phase 4. Indictments. It would be long. It would be ugly. And it would be personal. He stared at the timeline until his vision blurred. Then he picked up his pen and wrote across the bottom in thick, angry strokes. They thought I was alone. Tomorrow, they'd find out exactly how wrong they were. Fairview's police department went into full lockdown the moment the subpoenas landed. Records were suddenly missing. Body cam footage could not be located. Patrol logs accidentally deleted. Derek saw it for what it was, desperation. He filed emergency motions within hours, demanding immediate court intervention. Judge Ramirez, a no-nonsense federal judge with a reputation for hating cover-ups, granted them all. The department was ordered to preserve every document, every video, every radio transmission. Failure to comply would mean sanctions and jail time. Inside City Hall, the panic grew. Emails leaked to the press showing senior officials trying to spin the story, calling Derek an agitator, blaming confusion during the arrest. The public wasn't buying it. Citizens packed council meetings, demanding resignations. Local businesses posted Derek's face in their windows under banners reading, "We stand with Derek." But the real blow came 2 weeks later. Veronica obtained a sealed internal affairs report, one Fairview PD had tried to bury. Inside, documented complaints against the same 2 officers who arrested Derek, stretching back 6 years. Beatings, illegal searches, false arrests, all disproportionately targeting Black and Latino residents. Every single complaint had been marked unsubstantiated. Every single victim had either dropped the case or been threatened into silence. Until now, Derek read the report with shaking hands, fury pounding behind his eyes. This wasn't just a broken system. It was a machine, built to grind people down and protect itself. And it had been operating in plain sight for years. He and Veronica crafted the next phase carefully. Public disclosure. Not just legal filings, but a full press release, with every dirty secret laid bare. They sent it to every major news outlet. By the next morning, Fairview wasn't just a local scandal. It was national shame. CNN, the New York Times, even international media picked up the story. A picture of Derek, bloodied and handcuffed, ran alongside headlines demanding accountability. The mayor held another press conference, this time shaking with fear instead of arrogance. "We take these allegations seriously," he stammered. "We are launching an independent investigation." Too late. The Department of Justice announced it was opening a federal civil rights probe into Fairview PD. Derek sat silently in his living room, phone buzzing nonstop as the news rolled in. Calls from national civil rights organizations, requests for interviews, offers to testify before Congress. He ignored most of it, because this was never about headlines. It was about the people Fairview thought no one would ever care about. The ones arrested without cause, beaten without witnesses, silenced without justice. Derek leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had ripped open the wound. Now, it was time to make sure it never closed the same way again. Tomorrow, depositions would begin. And for the first time, the men who had laughed while crushing him against the pavement would have to answer. Under oath, on record, with the whole world watching. The deposition room smelled of fear. Not Derek's. Theirs. Sergeant Joel Pierce, the wiry officer who first pulled his gun, sat stiffly at the long oak table, sweat darkening the collar of his uniform. Across from him, Derek sat calm and motionless, a legal pad in front of him, Veronica at his side. The court reporter adjusted her microphone. "State your name for the record," Veronica said coolly. "Sergeant Joel Pierce," he muttered. "And how long have you been employed by the Fairview Police Department?" 13 years. Veronica's questions started simple. Routine, background, training, patrol assignments. Pierce answered quickly, trying to appear confident. But Derek watched the cracks forming, the twitch in Pierce's right eye, the way his fingers drummed against the table when cornered. After 20 minutes, Veronica changed tactics. "Sergeant Pierce, are you familiar with the term clearing the streets?" Pierce stiffened. I mean, it's just slang," he said. "For what?" Pierce hesitated, glancing at his attorney, who gave a tight, useless nod. "Keeping certain areas under control," Pierce said finally. Veronica pounced. "And by certain areas, you mean predominantly Black neighborhoods?" Pierce swallowed audibly. I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," Veronica said, flipping a page in her notes. The court reporter's keys clattered, documenting every word. Piece by piece, Derek and Veronica dismantled Pierce's defenses. Why was Derek approached with a weapon drawn? Why wasn't verbal de-escalation attempted? Why was no body cam footage produced? Each answer dug the hole deeper. Finally, Derek leaned forward for the first time. "Sergeant Pierce," he said, voice low, steady. "When you tackled me to the ground, did you know who I was?" Pierce shook his head quickly. "No," he said. "And if you had known I was a licensed attorney and former federal investigator, would you have treated me differently?" Silence. Pierce's mouth opened. Closed. "No," he lied weakly. The room smelled of sweat and fear and crumbling power. Derek leaned back, satisfied. They didn't see him as a man. They saw skin. Threat. Target. And now the whole world would see them for what they truly were. By the end of the deposition, Pierce looked broken. His lawyer requested a recess. Veronica agreed without smiling. In the hallway outside, Derek watched as Pierce slumped against the wall, hands trembling. One officer down. Dozens more to go. Over the next week, the depositions piled up, and so did the evidence. Patterns of abuse. Codes and slang words. Supervisors looking the other way. Derek spent each night reviewing transcripts, crafting a strategy so meticulous no defense attorney could punch through it. This wasn't about a single bad night anymore. It was about an entire system exposed, rotting under the sunlight of undeniable truth. And Derek Hayes was just getting started. Fairview could no longer pretend it wasn't happening. Every major network covered the hearings live. Clips from depositions aired nightly, showing officers fumbling, lying, and falling apart under questioning. Community leaders demanded action. Parents marched their children down Maple Street, the very block where Derek had been assaulted, carrying signs that said, "We deserve better. Justice for Derek Hayes." The pressure was volcanic. Inside City Hall, officials whispered of settlements, desperate to stop the bleeding. But Derek refused. No amount of money could erase what had been exposed. He wanted judgment. He wanted accountability. He wanted a permanent mark on Fairview's record that could never be polished away. And he was getting closer every day. In the courtroom, Veronica filed a motion to compel the release of previously sealed internal memos, documents that could prove city leadership knew about the abuses for years and did nothing. The city's attorneys fought hard, filing motion after motion to block it. They failed. Judge Ramirez ordered the release. The memos were worse than anyone imagined. Emails between top brass joked about keeping the streets clean. Private group chats among officers mocked black residents with coded language. Meeting notes detailed strategies to minimize paper trails when use of force complaints came in. Derek read them late into the night, rage burning hotter with every page. This wasn't neglect. This was policy. And now it was out in the open. Veronica moved fast. She scheduled a public evidentiary hearing, a rare procedure allowing live testimony and cross-examination before the court. It would be brutal. It would be televised. Exactly what Fairview had tried so hard to avoid. The night before the hearing, Derek stood alone outside the courthouse. The old building loomed above him, cold and indifferent. He thought about every man and woman who had walked into places like this hoping for justice and walked out with nothing but scars. He wasn't going to be one of them. Tomorrow, the people who had humiliated him would have to face the facts they had buried for decades. And the city that enabled them would be dragged into the light with them. He took a long breath, feeling the weight of it all settle across his shoulders, heavier than any set of handcuffs. But he didn't break. He didn't bend. Because Derek Hayes knew the truth. Real change wasn't clean. It was ugly. It was exhausting. It demanded everything. And he was ready to give it. When he turned away from the courthouse that night, he didn't feel fear. He felt purpose. Tomorrow wasn't just a hearing. It was a reckoning. And Fairview was finally out of places to hide. The courtroom buzzed with a low, electric tension. Camera crews lined the back wall. Reporters filled every seat. Locals squeezed shoulder to shoulder, some standing in the aisles just to witness it. At the front of the room, Derek sat beside Veronica, a thick binder of evidence in front of him. Across the aisle, the city's defense team looked pale, brittle, exhausted. Judge Ramirez entered, the room snapping to attention. "This court is convened for the evidentiary hearing in Hayes versus City of Fairview," he announced. "All testimony today is under oath and subject to perjury penalties. No speeches. No delays." The first witness was called, Chief Alan Brody, head of the Fairview Police Department. He moved stiffly to the stand, adjusting his tie with trembling fingers. Veronica approached the podium. "Chief Brody," she began, "how long have you served as chief?" 8 years, he said, voice tight. "In those 8 years, were you ever made aware of patterns of racial profiling within your department?" Brody shifted. "I don't recall specific instances," he hedged. Veronica clicked her remote. A giant screen behind her lit up with an email, Brody's own words. "We need to be more aggressive in clearing undesirables from residential areas." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Veronica's voice stayed calm. "Would you like to revise your statement, Chief?" Brody's mouth opened and closed uselessly. She didn't wait. One by one, she dragged out memo after memo, complaint after complaint. Each document a nail in the coffin. Brody sweated through his shirt before he even left the stand. And it didn't stop there. Officer Nunez, the young patrolman who had come forward, testified next. His voice cracked as he described the unofficial quotas. The code words. The cover-ups. He pointed directly at the two officers who had brutalized Derek. They laughed about it, Nunez said. They called it street sweeping. They thought no one would ever challenge them. The courtroom sat frozen, the weight of the truth suffocating. Derek never moved, never blinked. He wanted them to look at him, the man they had tried to erase, and know they had failed. By noon, the evidence was overwhelming. Judge Ramirez called a recess. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. Derek stood on the steps, reporters thrusting microphones toward him. He spoke calmly, each word cutting like a blade. This was never just about me. This is about every voice they silenced, every family they tore apart, every future they crushed. And today, they answered for it. No slogans, no shouting, just truth. And it was louder than anything Fairview could muster in defense. Behind him, city attorneys huddled, whispering frantically. They knew it was over. They had built their house on sand. And Derek Hayes had just brought the flood. Tomorrow, the judge would issue his ruling. But Derek already knew. The system that once tried to grind him into dust was crumbling. And he wasn't finished yet. The ruling came down at 10:02 a.m. Judge Ramirez's voice was cold, steady, devastating. In the matter of Hayes versus City of Fairview, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The words echoed through the packed courtroom. For violation of constitutional rights under the 4th and 14th Amendments, for use of excessive force, for unlawful arrest without probable cause, and for systematic racial discrimination condoned at the highest levels. The damages awarded? 8 figures. One of the largest civil rights judgments in the history of the state. The courtroom exploded, some gasping, some cheering, some simply sitting in stunned silence. The city's defense team looked shattered, heads bowed, hands trembling. Derek sat perfectly still, fists clenched lightly against the table, every muscle coiled with years of buried rage finally finding release. But money wasn't the victory. The real blow came in the judge's final order. Mandatory federal monitoring of the Fairview Police Department for the next 10 years. Quarterly public reports. A complete overhaul of training, leadership, and policies with Derek's nonprofit, the Hayes Foundation, named as a mandatory advisory body. They would never bury the truth again. Not while he was watching. Outside the courthouse, the scene was electric. Dozens of people lined the streets. Signs waving. Cameras flashing. Voices chanting his name, but Derek didn't bask in it. He wasn't a hero. He was the reminder. The proof that one person could rip a crack into a wall built to withstand generations of silence. At the press conference, Veronica stood beside him, barely containing her pride. This victory belongs to every single person who was told to sit down, shut up, and accept injustice as normal, she said into the microphones. Today proves that silence is not our destiny. When it was Derek's turn to speak, he kept it simple. I knocked on the wrong door, he said, voice steady. And they showed me who they really are. He let that hang in the air, a condemnation more powerful than any speech. In the following days, the fallout spread like wildfire. The police chief resigned under pressure. 2 senior city officials were indicted for obstruction of justice. Federal agents raided internal affairs offices, seizing hidden records. Derek worked late into the nights, not celebrating, but building. He expanded the Hayes Foundation, launched legal workshops, created scholarships for minority students pursuing law and criminal justice careers. And he kept walking the same streets where he had once bled on the concrete, had held high, untouchable now in ways no badge or gun could erase. He knew the old forces hadn't disappeared. They were regrouping, waiting. But he was ready for them. He had already won once. And next time, he wouldn't be knocking on the wrong door. He would be kicking it down. The real battle began after the cameras left. Old power structures didn't crumble quietly. They fought back, hard, dirty, and in the shadows. Anonymous threats flooded Derek's inbox. Tires slashed outside the Foundation's office. Whispers of a recall petition to remove federal oversight stirred among Fairview's wealthier neighborhoods. Some city officials tried to stall reforms, bury reports, create bureaucratic fog. They wanted to outlast him. But Derek was ready. He filed injunctions faster than they could plan meetings. He called out obstruction in open court. He kept the public's eyes locked onto every underhanded move. No more quiet cover-ups. No more backroom deals. Fairview's corruption now unfolded under a spotlight so bright it left nowhere to hide. Meanwhile, the Hayes Foundation became a fortress. Legal clinics, community action teams, voter education drives. Not just defense, offense. In 1 year, police stop rates for black residents dropped by 43%. Civilian complaint filings tripled because people finally believed someone would listen. The old guard fumed, powerless. At city council meetings, Derek sat silently at the back, letting his presence alone remind them. I'm still here, watching, fighting. One night, leaving a late council session, Derek found a note under his windshield wiper. No signature, just 6 words, scribbled in heavy ink. You should have stayed quiet. He held the paper between 2 fingers, expression blank. The threat didn't scare him. It confirmed he was winning. Derek folded the note carefully and tucked it into his jacket. Another reminder. Another reason to keep pressing. He thought about the teenagers who waved at him on the street now. About the elderly woman who baked pies for the foundation every Sunday as thanks. About the once scared citizens who now stood behind microphones demanding justice themselves. The old system had broken more than bones. It had broken belief. And Derek had rebuilt it, brick by stubborn brick. Still, he knew he couldn't stay in Fairview forever. New battles were rising in new towns. Calls came from neighboring cities. Can you help us? Can you teach us? Can you show us how to fight? He would answer them. Because Fairview wasn't an exception. It was a symptom. And if Derek Hayes had learned anything, it was this. You didn't ask systems built on injustice to change. You made them. You forced them. And if they resisted, you knocked again. Harder. Louder. Until the walls shook and the doors splintered open. Tomorrow, Derek would announce the expansion of the Hayes Foundation statewide. Tomorrow, he would take the fight farther. But tonight, walking alone under the sharp winter stars, Derek allowed himself one moment of peace. Not because the battle was over. Because the silence around him wasn't fear anymore. It was respect. Earned. Unshakable. Permanent. The auditorium was packed. Students, teachers, lawyers, activists, all gathered to hear Derek Hayes speak. The first statewide summit for policing reform, organized by the Hayes Foundation, had drawn more people than anyone expected. Derek stood backstage, calm, composed, notes folded in his pocket, though he wouldn't need them. He had lived every word he planned to say. When the MC called his name, the room erupted into applause. Derek stepped onto the stage, lights bright, cameras rolling, but he didn't flinch. He stood behind the podium for a moment, scanning the crowd, the future he had fought for, row after row of faces full of fire and hope. Then he spoke. I wasn't supposed to be here, he said, voice low but carrying. I was supposed to be just another file in a drawer. Another case dismissed. Another life crushed quietly, so no one had to feel uncomfortable. A hush fell over the room. But you cannot bury the truth forever, he continued. You cannot beat it into submission. You cannot arrest it into silence. He spoke of Fairview, of broken promises, of the night he bled into the pavement, and of the day he decided that survival wasn't enough. That fighting back wasn't optional. It was necessary. He pointed to the crowd. You are the proof, he said. Every step you take, every law you change, every voice you raise, you tear another brick from the walls they built to contain us. The auditorium trembled with silent emotion. Derek ended simply. This isn't about one city, one man, one case. He paused. This is about making sure that when the next Derek Hayes walks into a room, head high, scars showing, heart unbroken, the system doesn't see a threat. He stepped back from the podium, letting the applause crash over him. Not a roar. A vow. Later, alone in his hotel room, Derek looked out at the city skyline. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was different. Because he had refused to back down. Because he had refused to let them forget. He thought about the day he first knocked on that wrong door. How easily his life could have ended right there, lost in a cloud of lies and excuses. But it hadn't. He had turned their attempt to erase him into something permanent. Something undeniable. Derek Hayes didn't just survive injustice. He made sure it never felt safe again. And he wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Tomorrow, another city would call. Another fight would rise. And Derek would be there. Not knocking, but walking straight through the front door. Unstoppable. Unbreakable. Unforgotten. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire action and hope.